Alright, so unfortunately, the beta for Etheria Restart is over, but I'm still going to keep talking about the game because I am super excited for it, and probably the mode in the game that I'm the most interested in, especially for the full release, is going to be the real-time PvP. I think the way it's set up, it has a lot of potential, and we could probably see some really interesting matches once people have more than just like a week to build up their accounts. So today, I'm going to go over the PvP mode, kind of doing like a beginner's guide for it, just going over the mechanics of PvP. And I'm going to hold off on talking about like, oh, this character is like the best for PvP or anything like that, like character specific stuff, because I haven't had as much playtime as other people. So I definitely do want to hold off until I have some more playtime and more understanding of more of the characters. But I do plan to cover like best PvP characters sometime in the future. So to go into this guide here, there are 3 main phases of the real-time PvP. You have the draft phase, you have the ban phase, and then you have the general just gameplay phase. So the first phase being the draft phase, the game will randomly select who will pick their character first between you and your opponent. And this is operated in a snake draft format, meaning that when player 1 will pick a character, then player 2 will pick a character, and then it's going to loop back around so that player 2 will pick again. So it goes, player 1 has 1 character, player 2 picks 2, then player 1 picks 2, and this repeats until each side has 5 characters. And the really cool thing about this, which I think is one of the first pieces of depth that this mode is going to have, is that if one player chooses a character, like let's say for example, Leanne is a free SSR that everyone's going to have and a lot of people are going to have built. If player 1 chooses Leanne at the start of the draft, player 2 can no longer use Leanne. So this is going to, emphasize having a lot of characters built on your account so that you can account for situations like that. Because if you only have 1 DPS character built and your opponent is using the same DPS character and they get to pick it before you, then you're kind of screwed because you're not going to have much damage. And same thing, like if you only have 1 healer built or 1 sustain built and your opponent is using the same one, then you're just going to be out that character and you won't have another backup to use instead. So having several characters built for all the different main roles will be a very important thing for PvP. But I feel like it'll also depend on how the sort of meta progresses and how many characters stay viable throughout the course of the game. But we'll have to see as the game progresses and as more characters get released as well. Then for the second phase of the PvP, we have the ban phase. So now it's interesting that the ban phase comes right after the draft phase, because I feel like a lot of PvP games I've seen, and even like MOBAs as well, the bans happen before character choices, but for Etheria Restart, you actually have a ban phase after the character choices. So once the draft phase finishes, you will see your opponent's 5 characters pop up on the screen. It's going to allow you to select one of their characters to no longer take part in the match. So of the 5 characters your opponent picked, let's say you know that they're running like a top tier character, or if there's a character that you just really don't want to fight because it counters your team, you can just remove that character from their roster, and they're doing the same thing to you, of course. So you're going to lose one of your characters. And this is such a big thing for me because it's really going to prioritize good team building and making sure that characters are, obviously, characters going to have their main role, but having characters that can fulfill some side roles as well, which Etheria Restart does a great job of having their characters be able to perform some side roles as well, like a sustain that also can do like sub DPS damage, a support that also can provide like a shield, things like that. So they do have a pretty good handle on that, and I think those kind of characters are very important because if your opponent takes out your main DPS, you're going to want to be able to deal damage somehow. So having some pretty solid like sub DPS kind of characters that also have some utility or some healing or some shielding, stuff like that, can also be very good. And after the ban phase, you are going to be put into the gameplay, and it is going to be a 4v4 battle rather than a 5v5, which I think is cool. It would be nice to have more like 5v5 kind of content in the game, but I think with the way PvP is set up, I think it's totally fine for the 4v4, plus to add that extra level of depth to where you draft 5 characters, but one of them is not usable. So I do think that is very cool. And then the last phase of PvP is the actual match, which It is very similar to a normal battle, but you are fighting against a real person in real time. You're not fighting against an AI, and you're fighting against actual like character builds. And I think once you get up to the higher ranks and sweatier kind of PvP, which I didn't really rank up too much. I think I was like bronze 2 or 3 at the end of the beta, but for the higher ranks, you're probably going to see like top-notch builds, like very high speed stats. So that turn order and playing around that is going to be a priority. And there also is a 30-second action timer as well, so you do have to make your moves within 30 seconds. You don't have an unlimited amount of time like in PvE. So it is very important to know your characters and get your moves out in that time. And I think the two biggest things that are going to make or break your success in PvP are going to be the quality of your character builds and the amount of game knowledge you have. Because I think better builds and also just having more characters built as well as kind of adding on to that, that's going to make you be able to perform better. Because if you have your characters built properly, like if your supports have very high speed, they're going to be able to act very often. If your DPSs have good like crit ratios, you're going to get a lot of damage on them, and that can be really good if your opponent is not running like a shielder that can mitigate any kind of damage. So things like that can be good as well. But game knowledge, especially for a turn-based game, is going to be so important, because not only is knowing core game mechanics good, because like just knowing what certain buffs do, what certain debuffs do that are like core to the game, and the way the turn meter works as well. Those things are going to be important to just generally know the flow of the game. But once you start also knowing what characters can do, even if you're not like an expert on their kit, if you know like one super important thing, especially with some characters that have some specific mechanics, like for example, how Chloros can stop revives from happening in his kit. That is something that if you know that going in and your sustain is a revive character, then you can say, okay, my gameplay needs to be focused around getting rid of Chloros, because then I'm not going to be able to revive if he's on the field. And then you have other things like how Doki Doki has like a multiple at a time like turn meter increase for the team. So you might be like in a good spot, but then Doki Doki will pop her skill 3 and just bring everyone up. And just like a lot of things like that, like obviously character knowledge is not something you're going to have as like a new player right away, but the more you play the game, the more you're going to be able to build up this gameplay knowledge, character knowledge, and that is something, if you're able to apply that knowledge in a real-time match, you're going to be able to have more success. And when we have two players that have a lot of game knowledge, that's where we get some of the best PvP matches. Then the last thing I want to talk about for the gameplay is that right now, I think most SSR and SR characters can work well in the PvP. And like I said, a lot of characters are pretty multifaceted, where while they do have like a main role, whether it's a damage dealer, a healer, support, a debuffer, stuff like that, I think that focusing in on the team building can also be very good. And there are several SR characters that are very good. Like I didn't use him during the beta, but I heard Marvel is really good. And also Ray is also a pretty solid DPS character as well. And he is free too, so we do love to see that. But I do think right now with the way the beta is, and hopefully it stays this way for the full release, I think that PvP is in a pretty interesting spot. And with more characters coming out and people having time to actually like build up their accounts, having proper time to roll for modules, for shells, and all that stuff, I think this PvP mode is going to be very good, and it's something I definitely plan to do content on as part of all the Etheria restart videos I plan to do. So that is everything for the PvP mode. Let me know what you think down in the comments down below. But thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed and want to see more content from me, be sure to hit that subscribe button. But with that, everyone, I will see you all next time.